It appears that Matt Gaetz just can't help but continuously getting owned by people that he tries to sharpshoot. Is this guy stupid? We'll find out.
Chairman, Mr. Secretary, why was Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lomeyer relieved of his command?
It was a decision made by his chain of command, and typically those decisions are made based upon either having confidence or a lack of confidence. This issue is under investigation by the IG, and so I won't comment any further on that.
This is something that happens very frequently in the United States military. It doesn't matter what rank or grade you are. If you're in a command level position, and if you go on a podcast and you represent yourself as a spokesperson for the United States military, if you acknowledge your rank whatsoever, and you don't necessarily say that these are my points of views, but the second that you represent the United States military and you make the comments that Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lomeyer made, and this was a decision that was made by his chain of command to see to it that he gets relieved. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. You can argue with it all you want to. I mean, let's be honest. I was just as shocked when Captain Crozier, a Navy captain who put the welfare of his sailors ahead of his own career to ensure that they get protected, to make sure they get saved because there was a possible spread of COVID on his battleship. He made that decision and he was relieved for it, but people are going to remember him for that. Lieutenant Colonel Lomeyer is probably not going to be remembered for, he'll be remembered for going on a podcast giving his point of view, saying that there's Marxism being spread throughout the military, which isn't happening. But he's making these points of view and trying to speak on behalf of the military, saying that there's Marxism being spread, which isn't happening once again. He's going on there and making a mockery and using his rank to get his points of view spread across. That's why he was relieved, and more than likely, that's what the Inspector General's investigation turned up right there. A huge difference right here, but this isn't something that the Congressman Matt Gaetz has any idea about, that you can't just go on a podcast and make these wild speculations and not expect blowback from it. This isn't a private sector job. This isn't necessarily one where, like, if you were to go on a podcast and on your own private time and give your opinion about something, but this man literally spoke saying this is what the military is doing right here, and saying it's spreading cultural Marxism, which is a complete fallacy, and it isn't true.
In my previous discussions with service members and particularly officers, I would hear about complaints over parts not arriving on time, long deployments, and in my more recent discussions with those officers, the number one issue that they raised to me with concern, often unable to speak publicly for fear of the type of retribution that Lieutenant Colonel Lomeyer faced, they say that your stand down regarding extremism did not help our military, it hurt the military. And I want to share with you that perspective, that it caused service members to otherize one another, it impaired group cohesion, and interesting to me is that I've heard those sentiments most frequently from units that are majority-minority, that this was not particularly helpful. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe share with us more specificity regarding the definitions that seem to be a challenge when Ms. Hartzler was asking questions. How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
Okay, Congressman, if you're really going to go down that route, saying that critical race theory is going to affect the unit cohesion in units that are predominantly minority right there, and you're going to tell me that a stand down talking about extremism, even though it may not be that common as some people might say, let me just break it down for you really quickly, okay? Stuff like that is not going to affect unit cohesion right there. Do you know what does affect unit cohesion, as a matter of fact, especially in the United States military? The sexual assaults that do take place within the United States military. Let's just break it down like this. The Army didn't prosecute this staff sergeant, this who got promoted to Sergeant First Class. They did not prosecute him who was accused of rape. But guess what? He did it again and again. He got off on it with a slap on the wrist after he raped the wife of a young soldier under his charge during a Super Bowl party in 2017. It wasn't the first time he raped someone, according to charge sheets, and it wouldn't be the last. The victim, Leah Ramirez, reported the rape to the Army CID the next day. After a party held at Ramirez's house near Fort Bliss, Texas. Her husband was passed out drunk after Hughes had egged him on to continue taking shots of whiskey throughout the evening. The Ramirez put her husband to bed, the party and everyone else left. Ramirez was outside alone with Hughes and he propositioned her for sex. She said no. So Hughes grabbed her, forced him up against the ground, later dragged her by the hair into the home where he raped her, she said. And it ended, Ramirez hid in the bathroom until Hughes left the house. I waited until the morning. I went to the hospital to get checked. It took CID 48 hours to get to my house for evidence, so I lived in the crime scene for 48 hours, and it took 3 years to do anything. You want to talk about destroying unit cohesion? That's the fucking way you do it. And it does it even worse when the fact that he got away with it. Not once, but multiple times did he get away with these rape allegations right here. Now that's the kind of shit that will actually affect an entire unit cohesion. Not this constant notion of critical race theory right here. Now, do I understand everything about what critical race theory is? No, I don't understand what critical race theory 100% is, and I'm going to be perfectly honest about that. This is something that I'm actually going to listen into, but I'm actually going to let the Joint Chief of Staff, General Milley, clarify on this later on into the video. But for now, let's just go ahead and go right into the video once again.
Could I make a comment, Secretary? I'm sorry.
I'm very limited on my time, General Milley.
Well, I just want to make a comment that the feedback
I know, but
I've gotten
I've asked the question to Secretary Austin.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation. And so we are focused on extremist behaviors and not ideology, not people's thoughts, not people's political orientation. Behaviors is what we're focused on. And one final point, and thanks for your anecdotal input, but I would say that I have gotten 10 times that amount of input, 50 times that amount of input on the other side that have said, hey, we're glad to have had the ability to have a conversation with ourselves and with our leadership. And that's what we need to make sure
again,
that we remain
reclaiming my
a
time,
cohesive
Mr. Secretary, it may be that you're receiving that input in the ratios you describe because it was your directive. It may be that people are concerned about criticizing your decision because Lieutenant Colonel Lomeyer was not relieved of his command for his actions. He was not relieved of his command because of poor performance regarding his duties. He was relieved of his command precisely because of his thoughts and because of his critique of critical race theory. It is particularly helpful that you have said that the Department of Defense does not embrace critical race theory and that you think the discussion is not appropriate. I would suggest that it is the ideology that is not appropriate, and it is particularly concerning to me that you have hired a critical race theorist to give you advice on personnel matters, and that person is Bishop Garrison. And I would particularly observe that on July 27, 2019, Bishop Garrison tweeted regarding former President Trump, he's dragging a lot of bad actors out into the sunlight, normalizing their actions. And here's the relevant part. If you support the president, you support that. There is no room for nuance in this. There is no more, but I'm not like that talk. And then he replies to his own tweet with what seems to be a very ethno-nationalist hashtag, hashtag Black44. Could you enlighten us as to what advice Mr. Garrison has given you, and are you concerned that while you testify publicly to our committee that the department doesn't embrace critical race theory, you have hired someone who is precisely a critical race theorist?
This is the first I've ever heard Mr. Garrison be described as a critical race theorist, so this is new. And I'm sure
did you review his
would,
tweets before you hired him, personally?
Pardon me?
Did you review his tweets before you hired him?
I did not personally review his tweets.
I would just ask that maybe that be helpful. Is there anything you can share in just these final seconds regarding any advice he's given you?
Let me just share one other thing that you brought up, Congressman, about the input that comes to me. You know, I trust my leadership from top to bottom that they will give me fair and balanced and unvarnished input. And for you to say that people are telling me what I want to hear, I get it, but I'm smart enough to know
that does happen.
Yeah. You know, maybe they're telling you what you want to hear.
Well, I don't know that they even know what I want to hear.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Brown is recognized for 5 minutes.
Got him. See, that's the funny part right there. This guy swears up and down that is like, well, wait a second. How do we know the Secretary of Defense is only being told what he wants to hear, but didn't even take the time to think that about maybe he's being told the things that he may want to hear as well. Because even he has stated that some people might be telling the Secretary of Defense, oh, you're only being told what you want to hear. But yet he's not even considering that the same thing could be said for himself. Now, here's the thing, okay? Even if critical race theory is being taught in the military, there is a lot that is being discussed, and there's a lot of times where you have certain things like every quarter you're supposed to go over equal opportunity. You're also supposed to go over sexual harassment, assault, rape prevention training. You're also supposed to go through bystander intervention training. There's all kinds of training that, yes, people that would sit down, it's like, okay, we just got to, kind of, check the block. But they still have to have some sort of classes they have to go through. And everybody has to acknowledge that everything they're being taught is for practical reasons. It's because it is still a problem. If it wasn't a problem, we wouldn't be teaching these things now, would we? That's the thing you have to consider now. Even if they feel like we are being indoctrinated or the United States military is being indoctrinated, which it isn't, okay? It's not being indoctrinated to talk about critical race theory. It's simply talking about this is what's being taught in curriculum. Now, for the record, critical race theory isn't something that's just brand new. It's actually been curriculum since the 1970s, apparently. You don't have to take my word for it. It says it right there. The basic tenets of critical race theory, or CRT, emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 1970s and early 1980s, created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado, among others. Now, that's pretty significant, but the thing is, we kind of tend to push these issues off to the side for reasons I still don't really understand about. Now, there's been this huge discussion as to whether critical race theory is just making it to where the white man is evil, the white man is the devil. First off, I haven't heard anything such like that. I have heard some people call the white man the devil, but that's usually like the Israelites that you would see, which I actually mentioned in my last show, where they usually say that the white man is the devil. But that is just such a small minority amongst other minorities in the population. I mean, to say that this is all we're being taught is completely absurd in my personal opinion. Again, this is all my personal opinion, and if I'm wrong about it, I'm more than willing to understand where I'm wrong on this certain topic right here.
And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I know my time is very precious, but I would like to yield some of my time to General Milley because I know that he had some comments that he wanted to make when Representative Gaetz was talking, as well as Mr. Waltz, about a similar subject of the stand down and race theory. Would you like a minute or so to comment on that? Do you remember what your line of questioning or thought was there?
Sure. First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military. And I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on that.
Thank you, General.
It's all right there, honestly. I mean, what more can I say? They pretty much laid it all out right. They're not talking about how everybody's being indoctrinated or how everybody's being forced to learn about these things, to be told how to hate themselves. They're just being told they need to understand why this is being taught, why this is a certain level of curriculum. Now, we can have our criticisms about what the merits of what's being taught now. However, I just want everybody to remember something. For years in high school, middle school, elementary school, guess what I was taught? I was taught about the merits of what makes Christopher Columbus so fantastic. I was told about how he was a great hero and how he discovered the United States. Let's ignore the fact that he pretty much tried to wipe out the indigenous population. Then we can also talk about how throughout the history of our country, how our forefathers, the people that wrote the Constitution, were all great men, men to be revered. Let's not forget the fact that some of these men were actually quite terrible. George Washington, for example, was a slave owner at the age of 11. And he only wanted to allow one slave or a slave to be freed upon his death, to which his wife only released one slave right. He was actually a very vicious slave owner from back in the day. Now, these are the parts of history we are not taught about. We have tended to just kind of wash over history and try to make it into something that's not true. And I wonder if it's just because people are just ashamed of what our history and they just don't want it to be taught because they're afraid that it's actually going to cause people to hate America. No, nothing could be further from the truth. I'd much rather us be taught history in its most accurate form, because that's what history is meant to do. History is not meant to be floofy and meant to teach us only what makes us feel good. There's great parts of our history and there's negative parts of our history. And that's what some people can't seem to grasp onto that concept of. If this is to make us feel bad, it's not so much to feel bad, it's just to make us aware of what happened in history. Because far too often we just kind of gloss over certain parts of history, and the second that we hear about something that might have happened, we automatically dismiss it because we don't want to be looked at as the bad guy. Listen, history has a lot of dark moments. History is not meant to be fun and games. History is just meant to be taught in accurate form, as accurately as possible. But some people just cannot handle the truth, right? And that's the unfortunate part of this. This is why we've got to focus on why it's so important for us to actually understand, what does critical race theory mean? This is something that I'm going to look into, and once I look into it, I'll make another video and I'll give you my thoughts and views on critical race theory, and I might even actually bring on a couple guests that might actually give me their points of view on it. Other than that, I think there's nothing more really to say about this. Now, again, at the end of the day, should I really be saying that Congressman Matt Gaetz is an idiot? I'm not going to necessarily say he's an idiot. I'm just going to simply say that he tends to make himself into this laughing stock. It's not the first time that people have pretty much put him in his place right there. Now, I respect the fact that he is an elected official. He is a congressman, and I completely understand that, you know, these people are elected to these positions by their constituents. He's obviously in there for a reason because some people look into him. My biggest problem with him is the fact that in 2017, there was actually like a way for them to fight human sex trafficking, and he was the only dissenting vote out of everybody else. He was the one dissenting vote, and to me that just raises some serious red flags, let alone the fact of what's going on with him as far as dealing with minors. So this is something that we have to take into consideration, but mostly I just want to talk about what just took place in that video right there. So tell me, what did you think about that video? What do you think about the Secretary of Defense, Austin, and what did you think about the Joint Chief of Staff, General Milley? What are your points of view? What do you think about what they said in that video? Whose side are you on in this case? Are you on the side of the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chief of Staff, or are you more on the side of Congressman Matt Gaetz? Please let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and hit share and subscribe.